often called the smartest guy on the stage, and he will be when he joins me. Please join me in welcoming Speaker Newt Gingrich.
Well, thank you all very much. Thank you, first of all, for coming out tonight, because these kind of dinners and these kind of opportunities to build and strengthen the local party are at the heart of a free society. So I'm delighted that you're here. It was great backstage to see Congressman Joe Pitts, who's doing a great job and who you can be very proud of, and who will lead the way in replacing Obamacare with something that will work. And so we're delighted. I also had to come here because his predecessor, Bob Walker, has been my national campaign chairman, and Bob and I worked together very closely to create the Contract with America and the work that went into reforming welfare and balancing the budget for 4 straight years, and creating the tax cuts that led us to get unemployment down to 4.2%. Owed a great deal to what Bob Walker had done, so I'm thrilled to be back in what was once his district. You know, as somebody who was born in Harrisburg and spent the first 10 years of his life in Hummelstown and Middletown and Steelton, I grew up, a few of you are old enough, you'll remember this. I grew up when Channel 8 would come on the air early in the morning with a test pattern, and they would send this, the younger people all think this is insane. You know, it's describing a world that can't possibly exist. And they would spend some time, the engineers, stabilizing the test pattern to stabilize the signal. And then you'd watch TV all day, and it's black and white. And at the end of the day, about midnight, they would have the Star-Spangled Banner, the flag waving, and a Navy jet would fly past. Now, a few of you probably remember this. I tell that story to modern audiences and point out to them that this was back in an era when I think when it first started, it was the only TV station in central Pennsylvania. And nowadays, most of you have multiple channels. Some of you may have 400, 500, 600 cable channels, and you still can't find anything worth watching in the evening. Now, if I had a theme for why I've stayed in the race, why I got in the race, and what I'm really concerned about at its heart, it could be captured by the experience of Channel 8 when it was black and white and was only on the air for part of the day. The world has changed dramatically, but the U.S. government hasn't. The fact is, we need to modernize Washington as decisively as the transition from black and white television part-time to iPads and iPhones and all of the capabilities we have today. And government has clearly been captured by bureaucracies, ideologies, and interest groups which have blocked the future. You saw a sad symbol of that today when the great space shuttle flew for the last time, and the Discovery was carried on a Boeing 747 and circled around Washington before going to the Smithsonian. As an example of what's wrong with Washington bureaucracy, in the last 10 years, NASA has spent $181 billion without successfully developing a replacement for the space shuttle. And it makes you wonder what those thousands of people in the NASA headquarters do all day, since they don't have a manned vehicle to actually do space. And I have this image of them sitting around all day thinking space thoughts and holding meetings to discuss the possibility of someday planning so they could have a conference to contemplate whether or not they would begin to think about someday developing the possibility of applying for a grant to consider the chance that you could actually go back into space. Compare that decay of the American system with John F. Kennedy in May of 1961 saying, "We will place a man on the moon in this decade, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And the process of testing ourselves against the hard things is what makes us Americans." I come to you tonight because we need a candidate capable of debating Barack Obama in September and October and capable of telling the truth better than he tells falsehoods. We need a candidate who can draw the difference between the radicalism of Saul Alinsky and the basic documents of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Federalist Papers. And we need a candidate who understands that America has been about citizenship and freedom, not about bureaucrats and centralized government. And Obama is the greatest threat to the continuation of American civilization in our lifetime, and this is the most decisive election of our lifetime. I came tonight in part to challenge you to take seriously carrying the state of Pennsylvania for president this fall, because the objective fact is, if we carry Pennsylvania, it is impossible for Barack Obama to win the presidency. And you may ask, how would you carry Pennsylvania? First of all, you carry it by telling the truth. This is the worst economic record since the Great Depression. The policies of Barack Obama have kept millions and millions of people unemployed, and the real unemployment rate is dramatically higher than what we are currently being told, because the objective fact is millions of people have dropped out of work, even looking for work, out of despair at the anti-job socialist policies of this president. So first we should go to every household in Pennsylvania. And we should say to people, this is the most effective food stamp president in American history. And if you think food stamps are an adequate future for your children, you should be for Obama. But if you would like paychecks and a job, then you need to vote with us for change. I'm running in part because as a young congressman in the 1980s, I worked with Ronald Reagan. His policies of cutting taxes, cutting regulations, emphasizing American energy, praising those who create jobs, created 16 million new jobs in the Reagan years. I came back as Speaker of the House with the help of my good friend Bob Walker, and we ended up working with Bill Clinton, cutting taxes, reforming welfare. 2 out of 3 people went to work or went to school. The result was we brought unemployment down to 4.2% and created 11 million new jobs. I would be delighted to debate our record of private sector permanent job creation with Obama's record of disastrous subsidy of cronyism in the guise. He doesn't have a green energy policy. He has a greenback energy policy in which he gives greenbacks to his cronies who give themselves bonuses and then go bankrupt. We need to be the party that says flatly, we need an American energy independence policy so that no future president ever again bows to a Saudi king. And if we go to work for energy independence, which means developing offshore, developing federal land, going to 100% expensing for all new equipment so people can write off the expenses in 1 year, we will, by the end of the decade, be the largest producer of oil and natural gas in the world, and the price will come down dramatically. I get questioned by the news media about setting as a goal $2.50 a gallon or less. Well, let me give you the facts. New technologies, innovation, exactly what this John F. Kennedy was trying to get done, has opened up the world of natural gas, as many of you know, in western Pennsylvania. It's opened up the world of natural gas to such a degree that we went from a 7-year supply in the year 2000 to a 125-year supply today. We've increased the production of natural gas by 11% since 2008, and the price has come straight down. It was $7.97 a unit in 2008. It is now $2.05 a unit. We have the least expensive natural gas of any industrial country in the world. It's already starting to create jobs. Even Barack Obama has said it will lead to a minimum of 600,000 new jobs in the next decade. Now, if you got the same decline in the price of gasoline that we've actually historically experienced in the price of natural gas, it would be $1.13 a gallon. Now, my $2.50 was very modest compared to the historic fact. But there's a bigger part of this. If we bring the money back home, if we create the jobs here, we in fact will create several million new jobs. That's people who are no longer taking food stamps, unemployment, welfare, Medicaid, public housing. They're now taking care of their families, paying taxes. There is no single step that moves you towards a balanced budget better than getting people back to work so they're off the government and on the private sector actually paying taxes and increasing government revenue. In that setting, the estimate of Harold Hamm, who developed North Dakota, is that we have potentially $16 to $18 trillion in royalties that we could earn over the next generation. Now, what that means is if we were to impose fiscal discipline on Washington, and you have to impose it, the reason we got to a balanced budget in the 1990s is we insisted on it. If we were to insist on balancing the budget and then take all that royalty money and put it into a brand new debt repayment fund, we would in fact be in a position to pay off the federal debt in the lifetime of the youngest people who are here tonight. Now imagine a policy which on the one hand means we no longer bow to the Saudis, and on the other hand means we no longer worry about Chinese bondholders, because in one policy we've created American jobs, kept money at home, increased royalties to the federal government, paid off our national debt, and lowered the price of gasoline simultaneously. That is what sound, conservative, strategic planning should do. That's the sort of thing that allowed Ronald Reagan to defeat the Soviet Empire. That's the sort of thing that allowed us to win World War II. People forget. In World War II, we produced 83% of the oil produced in the world. And we can get back to being the leading producer, which means we can say to Europe, by the end of this decade, we should be able to say to Europe, India, Japan, and China, we do not have a problem in the Strait of Hormuz because we don't need the Persian Gulf oil. You have a problem in the Strait of Hormuz, and you had better figure out what you're going to do to carry your share of the burden. And let me say, part of what we should debate is pretty straightforward. As Commander-in-Chief, I will never apologize to foreign radicals while they were killing young Americans. And there's something strange about an Obama administration which rapidly apologizes to Islamic extremists, even though the people who defaced the Koran were the prisoners. And yet at the very same time they are apologizing, they're waging war on the Catholic Church and every right to life group in the United States. Now there's something wrong with this picture. The administration has now said, as part of its new policy of sensitivity, that which others hold sacred we will treat as sacred. Well, that's fine, but if it's good enough for Afghanistan, maybe it should be good enough for America. So maybe that means that crosses could go back up. Maybe that means the Ten Commandments could go back up. Maybe that means we could actually... If the president is for prayer 5 times a day in Afghanistan, maybe it could be for prayer in school once a day in America. Let me give you one last example, because we have to have a conservatism which in the Reagan-Thatcher tradition gets in the habit of being back on offense. It isn't enough for us to complain and defend. We have to communicate vividly to every American. And to carry Pennsylvania this fall, we need to communicate vividly to every Pennsylvanian of every background. So, the Obama administration wants to work on a United Nations Small Arms Treaty, which is actually a deliberate design by the left to take away the Second Amendment rights of Americans. I don't think it's enough to just oppose it. I spoke to the National Rifle Association Friday, and I challenged them. I said, in a Gingrich administration, we will introduce a treaty to codify for every human being in the world that they have the right to bear arms as a part of their God-given liberty, and people around the world would be safer if the Second Amendment applied everywhere in the world. Think about places like Darfur, where it's the predators who have the weapons. It's the rapists and the murderers who have the weapons. It is the innocent who've been disarmed. And the time has come for us to stand up. Why did the Founding Fathers, by the way, the Constitution does not give you the right to bear arms. The Constitution says the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, because the right predates the Constitution. It comes from your Creator. It's one of the unalienable rights. And why did the Founding Fathers believe this? Well, Adams writes about it, and Madison writes about it, and they're very clear. When the British went out to Concord and Lexington in 1775, they knew how to drive peasants and how to suppress rebellions. But they hadn't faced Americans. And they suddenly found themselves not dealing with peasants who had pitchforks, but dealing with American militia that had been training for 6 months. And they were decisively defeated. And they ran back to Boston. And that happened because the Founding Fathers understood that if you're going to be the land of the free, you have to be the home of the brave. We have an obligation to live up to that. A constitutional conservatism which draws on the wisdom of the Founding Fathers and which recognizes that each one of you personally is endowed by your Creator with certain unalienable rights, that God gives power to you personally and you are sovereign. You loan power to the government. The government never loans power to you. And the difference between us and Barack Obama is simple. We understand that Americans are citizens and the government is supposed to be a public servant. He thinks that the government is sovereign and we are supposed to be subjects, to be told what kind of car to drive, what kind of house to live in, what kind of income to have, what kind of job to have, because a handful of really smart people in Washington will make life better for the rest of us. Now that's a debate. If we have the nerve to go do it, and we say to every American across this country, would you feel better with your life being run by a Washington bureaucrat? Would you feel better with your health care being run by a Washington bureaucrat? Do you think your kids will be better off if education is driven by a Washington bureaucrat? Or do you believe that God has given you and those around you unalienable rights, and that you as a citizen deserve the right to be free and the responsibility to be free? I believe we could win that debate by an astonishingly big margin, because the truth is, in the end, the bureaucracies can't deliver, and in the end, they destroy freedom by the very nature of how they operate. You are here tonight because you're a key part of this process. It is the grassroots energy that created the Republican Party in the 1850s as the party of freedom. It was the grassroots energy that led the Goldwater movement to establish conservatism once again. It was the grassroots energy of 1979-1980 that led to the election of Ronald Reagan and literally the defeat of the Soviet Union, which disappeared. And once again, it will be the grassroots energy which takes America back from left-wing bureaucrats, left-wing judges, left-wing laws, and left-wing politicians. I came tonight to ask you to consider voting for me next week and to vote for my good friend Bob Walker and Cliff Frick, who are both our candidates for delegate. I am thrilled to be here tonight. As somebody who was born in Harrisburg, I have a particular bonding to the traditions of Lancaster, and I hope all of you will consider seriously giving us a chance, because if you'll help me, I can assure you, the party you'll have in September and October to watch the debates with Obama, you'll feel really good about what I learned from Channel 8 all those years ago. Thank you very, very much.